Yeah.
Present. Spencer, can I trouble you for a roll call?
Pardon me, Commissioner Collum, Commissioner O'Neill,
Here.
Vice Chair Barlow,
Here.
Chair Rodriguez,
Here.
Commissioner Rath,
Here.
Commissioner Peisel,
Here.
Commissioner Smith Covello. That is no absences. Planning staff present today are Planning Manager Levi Hill, Principal Planner Fernanda Roveri, and myself, Recording Secretary Spencer Arganbright. Information on participating in this meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is on this meeting's agenda, which is online at monterey.gov/agendas. Remote commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak, and a timer will be shown on the screen. If you are connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate. In the chamber, we recommend keeping phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with the meeting. Thank you for participating in your city government.
Thank you very much, Spencer. I'm going to open up the consent agenda. We only have one item, which are the approval of minutes, item number 2, February 12th, 2026. I hope everybody had a chance to look at the minutes. I am going to open it up for public comment. I see a member of city staff who is also a member of the public and a mini public member besides, but I see no one wants to participate in person. Spencer, is there anybody online that wants to participate?
There are currently no attendees online.
All right, perfect. So we're going to take it back to the commissioners. Does anybody want to make a motion or have a comment regarding the minutes of last meeting?
I'll move to approve the minutes as written.
We have, perfect. We have a motion and a second. All those in, sorry, you have a question, Spencer? No, okay, sorry about that. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I wasn't there, but I think I could still vote on the meeting. So
I think you can. So you're still an aye?
sure.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to end the consent agenda and we're going to open it up for general public comments. Here present, I don't see any hands raised or anybody approaching to speak. Spencer, is there anybody online that wants to speak?
There are currently no attendees online.
All righty, so we're going to close that part of the agenda and move over to the public appearance side. We have our first item, which is item number 3, provide update on Lower Presidio Historic Park. Do we have a presenter?
It's me.
Thank you.
Hello, hello. We'll have a presentation coming up. Thank you, Fernanda. Cool. So to start off, this started off with a presentation going to council, where we went to council about next options on Lower Presidio Historic Park back last year in 2025. And one of the guidings of council was to come back and discuss Lower Presidio Historic Park with the Museums Cultural Arts Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, and Historic Preservation Commission. So, hello. Starting off, basically, we're focused where Lower Presidio Historic Park, right over there, kind of separating New Monterey from Old Town Monterey, right around the corner, Pacific Street. And also, by the way, in today's MC Weekly, there is a short article about the Lower Presidio Historic Park, about the erosion on the hillside and what's going on. So, but it is one of the founding sites. We believe it as a trading site, as a midden site. It is a site where you typically would not find abalone up on the land unless people were actually there. So we know it was used by the different villages there. Its earliest sites, we believe about 10,000 plus years over there that people were there. The first people, the Esalen, Rumsian, and the hill from the records is Honokil was the name of the actual hillside there. But we know they're also the first abalone divers. So next slide. But it's been owned by our U.S. Army since 1847. So that you had Ord over there. We had Halleck. We've had a number of General Sherman was there. They were working on actually building the first fort over there. And in 1996, the city got into a 50-year lease with the Army for 25.15 acres. Next slide. And I will mention that on that, there was a move about last year to do there was an amendment to that lease, but that was specifically for the child care center because that was a 25-year lease, and that portion of the lease did expire, but we are in the middle of the lease right now. This is the aerial view of the site right there. The yellow is right around kind of the curve going in there. Next slide. But preserving open space. So what happened in basically, the 1980s, the United States Army was looking to sell land to private developers, including Huckleberry Hill, including Lower Presidio Historic Park. Basically, as you see there, you had Congressman Leon Panetta basically reject the Army's request and try to create what we ended up calling now the Monterey Way, which is the partnership between the city of Monterey and the United States Army Garrison, where we actually do public works over there at the Defense Language Institute. But they rejected the request to actually sell the Presidio, close it down to developers. So next slide. And this is the land block right over there. It went to Congress, and basically they said that would have changed that area pretty dramatically around that time. Next slide. So since that time, basically what ended up happening is they had to get into an agreement who's going to actually maintain the land. That's where the city of Monterey came in, and there was the 50-year lease for the facility. Basically, we take care of the land. And we don't pay for the lease. We pay for basically we do the work. We do the recreation. We run the museum, all those things. So they used to run a museum at Building 113, and they cleared out everything, sent it to Virginia, and changed their signage. And the city had to work with a historic master plan with the United States Army. So the entry signs were updated in terms with Old Monterey Foundation. The Sarah Monument Path is infill. They built it up above the archaeologically sensitive sites, putting concrete on top. And the city estimates we spend about $80,000 a year on that 25 acres. Next slide. So on the slide, you'll see here, because of how archaeologically sensitive that site is, the street signs are done in concrete posts above ground. The DG path up on the side, on the right side of that walking path, is done above hill too. So it's actually infill as well. So those are all things where we're not doing any work on there. So next slide. I'm just going to see where that's highlighted, those signs right there. And you go next one. And there's the path. So back to the purpose of the lease. Initially, we wanted to preserve open space. California State Parks actually owns the small Portola Landing Park right there in between the artillery, road, where there's right there. That little spot where the Murray Cross is at, the James Murray Cross is at, is actually owned by State Parks.
Hmm.
So State Parks owns that little spot next to the creek, and the creek is the landing spot of Father Sarah. But they did not want to handle restoration, maintenance, or anything. But they had previously in the 60s and 70s excavated down, because El Castillo, which it's known as it's a National Register of Historic Places as El Castillo, which was the Spanish and Mexican fort, was further closer to the curve and on the hillside. That site actually, California State Parks excavated it out, did the archaeology in the 60s and 70s, wanted to build a rebuilt fort there, never did. But they came back in the 80s, and at that time, I think probably due to cash restrictions, they said, we don't want to take it over. So that's when the city came in. Next slide. So as you'll see, 1996, we run into a lease, a 50-year lease, which will expire currently in 2046. Minimal maintenance functions, mowing, litter control, restroom maintenance. As I mentioned, the majority of objects in the little museum that's in there, in that little artillery shack building that's there, the museum, are owned by either the City of Monterey, Monterey History and Art Association, or different donors. Everything that was basically owned by the United States military, they used to actually have recreations of like models of what it looked like during the indigenous time. They had models of what it looked like in, I think in 1602, or they had, they just had different models out there, and they sent those all back away. So those are all gone, unfortunately. Next slide. So as I mentioned here, we've had over $1 million in maintenance on the site, a lot of that from CIP, NCIP, as well as some different grants. Next slide. History right there, that painting is on the inside. That painting is by Agatha Few. We are in the Few Memorial building right here for Agatha Few, who donated her estate from her and her husband's estate to build City Hall here, and the city buildings all here, all part of Agatha Few. So she was a painter as well. So she painted that Presidio curve right over there, which I like to see that as well. And as I mentioned, Vizcaino came here in 1602 at that site, at that tree where the Murray Cross is at. Sarah and Gaspar Portola had the first mass there, 1770. Site of the only land and sea battle in the west coast of the United States. So that was the Bouchard 1818, and where they won by sea but lost by land. And the Sloat Monument is the 1846 capture of Monterey for the United States of America. That was done in the semi-centennial. So the Sloat Monument on the top was done by veterans of the Mexican-American War for the 50-year anniversary. So they petitioned the Congress to build that. Next slide. So a couple other sites of importance on there, the Rumsian Ohlone or Esalen, depending on who you talk to, birthing stone. Also, some people call it a rain rock. It's a large rock up there. The Alejo Nino Cross, which is currently in our storage because somebody pushed it over. But that is not the actual burial site, but the first non-native buried in Alta California was Alejo Nino, a freed Black slave from Mexico. And he died on June 2nd. And Father Sarah landed June 3rd. So he was on the ship the day before. So after they held mass at the tree, they said, we buried him away from the tree. So probably right over there. So they put the cross right up on top of the hill. As I mentioned, the Bouchard Monument, the Sarah Monument that was donated by Jane Stanford from Leland Stanford and Jane Stanford, they donated that here. And the Sloat Monument up at the top of the hill. Next slide. So other sites on there, it's important for the 9th and 10th Cavalry, 24th and 25th Infantry for the Buffalo Soldiers. And they're coming here. They were not able to serve east of the Mississippi, but they were serving in the Philippines and in Cuba. And so they came and were stationed out in San Francisco, and then were sent from San Francisco to Monterey and to gather and train new horses. So first they were living in Pacific Grove, and then they helped build cavalry housing and stables up on the actual Presidio. So this photo I got from the PG Museum of Natural History, but they left from Monterey to become the first U.S. park rangers at Yosemite and Sequoia National Parks. Next slide. And as you'll see there, the 2002 interpretive master plan is what we initially worked off of for the signage, for the interpretive panels on there. And we've been working on this with the city and different departments for over 20 years. And I said 7,000 years of history, depending on who you talk to. Some people say 10,000 years. That's like, we know it's several thousand years. Next slide. And of course, you guys know about preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. This is your wheelhouse here. But just for all the other commissions to know that whenever we do anything here, because of this archaeological sensitive site and a site it's on multiple, it's overlapping archaeological sites on the space there, as well as a site of the national interests, that we have to make sure everything is done here sensitive. Next slide. And there's different walkways, improvements, everything right over there. Kind of that reddish area right there is around kind of the essential area of the Lower Presidio Historic Park. So it goes up to the gate. So if you're coming in from New Monterey, and there's that kind of sharp curve that turns right around there. The Boy Scout shack is also part of the lease, but the Boy Scout shack, when we signed the lease, it basically, the Army said, you guys are going to allow the Boy Scouts to continue to use the building. That's basically what it says there. The historic master plan, different projects do identify which sites are historic, which sites are not historic as well. So some of the works that were done, there was a stable study 2019, I believe around 2019, 2020, they're historic stables, but they were from the 1930s. They were not from the Buffalo Soldier era, and they were not from an earlier era. Those were actually torn down, and that was done there was numerous studies done with planning department, with museums department, consultation with the Army. So those were removed. Next slide. And Presidio curve. So that's what brings us kind of here, the initial comment. 2022, the United States Army contacted the city about what we call the sloughing on the hillside, the dirt coming off of the hill. And being an archaeologically sensitive site, we have to bring out Dudek, which is one of our contractors out there, to go through all of the soil coming on there, erosion. And the city actually owns that very small kind of inside square there where you will see a wood fence along the hillside. Next slide. So Army City right away. We have a very interesting property line right there, as you'll see, where little juts in right there. So the city installed that wood fence right on there to help hold in some of the soil. So next time you're driving to New Monterey or coming in from that side or walking there, take a look at that side. But it was done as a surface mount. It was not done with like excavation inside to do very limited construction on that site right there. Next slide. So as I mentioned, 2021, there's burrowing animals. There's just erosion on that hillside, water. We have heavy storms. We'll have very dry areas. And then all of a sudden we have heavy rains coming in and it washes things down. So there are different reasons that the hillside kind of comes there. And the Army wanted us to build a full-size wall. The height of the wall, height of the curve up there. So, you're looking at up to like 25 feet up high at some points. It's pretty high up there. And the city does not have the funding to build or to design to do the wall. Next slide. So at that point, they thought it'd be about $1.5 million to design and construct. There is NEPA and CEQA. There's CEQA, of course, California Environmental Quality Act. The NEPA is the National Environmental, for the actual acronym. What's that? Protection Act. And NEPA is because it's on federal property, because if this is a federal job, if they do it on federal property, they do it on NEPA guidelines and standards. And if the city does the work on the city property, it's under under CEQA. But we do everything with historic and tribe consultations. The important thing to recognize also with this site is that our local tribes are not federally recognized. Oni, Coastal Nation are not federally recognized. There are very few tribes in California that are federally recognized. That's a whole nother presentation. There's a whole lot of information about that. Has to do with the early 1850s, but Kerber and others came out and basically said these tribes are extinct. And when they did that, they were not eligible for federal tribal recognition. And the federal government has not identified new tribes since the 1970s for federal recognition, because they want you to have lineage from the moment around 1851 to present of tribal activities. So the federal, because this is a federal site, the federal government works with the federally recognized tribes. Federally recognized tribes work with the local tribes. So we still do work with the local tribes in terms of through these projects, but we work with them in consultation with the United States Army to make sure that we are going through all of the correct federal and state processes as well. As well as the project would be done by Army Corps of Engineers, and of course, funding, staff shortages, and opportunity costs. Next slide. So questions, we don't have to have answers for all these, but these are some of the questions I posed for the other commissions before the project came forward with the Army. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you for that presentation. I'll pass it on. There's a question to the commissioners for questions. Commissioner Crivello.
We were focusing on,
I'm sorry.
pardon?
Well, just think there are some other questions if you want to think about it. I can pose them if you guys want to think about them.
Gotcha.
So general. You have a
Well, we'll wait a little bit.
We'll wait.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, I got too much info.
No, got it.
But these are some of the questions that kind of came up initially in terms of working with council. And what I'm going to preface this with recently we just had a public meeting over at the Lower Presidio Historic Park, and Chair Rodriguez was there as well. And part of it was we did a survey for the community about Presidio operations. And the Army had just put out a 30-day notice regarding they are working on building a fence. They're working on building a fence or some kind of soil management for the hillside. And they got federal funding. They did a federal grant to actually do that work. Mm-hmm. So they are planning on doing that work. And this was before I did this part of this presentation as well. But part of the questions coming from council is, should the city continue this lease? Part of the questions with the lease was either the Army or the city could back out with 1 year's notice of having it. But then also if the city had backed out, will we continue to provide public access? Would the Army provide public access to that park if the lease was terminated? And the other part, should we continue to invest general fund dollars on the park? And because we're running into a budget crisis, budget, and what do we do with spending money on capital projects on this site as well? Next slide. You can click all the questions through real quick. And so one of our questions at the point was, can we remain low cost, no cost compliance? The museum is operated by volunteer docents, and we do most of our history tours there are, volunteer led. And are there other state or federal agencies, county agencies that can get into a new lease for this project? Thank you. And so part of that, the next part about that is the federal land, should the city pursue and advocate for national monument or national historic site designation? This is something I've been working on with Congressman Panetta, and I'm hopeful that we'll have something presented to the House in the next few weeks regarding national. There would be a Secretary of Interior study for this. And should they be the ones to possibly operate the site in perpetuity? And then another one, are there other regional agencies that can operate and provide access to services for this park? And I think, we're doing. So, yep. And the other question I just had for council on this is that if the Army is looking at market rate leases, which is one of the things they were looking at when we were discussing with the child care center, what would that look like? We don't know, because right now it's basically the lease is in a kind of we'll provide you with access to the park if you guys do historic preservation and provide open space. But if those federal guidelines changed for how they were to do leases in 25 years, what is that going to look like for us to provide a lease and try to lease out that parkland from the United States Army? Go ahead. And you can click through all of them. So Oh, yeah. So basically, we're looking at preliminary of looking at federal management of the park. Our understanding also is if the National Park Service were to take on this site, if they were ever to go back to that BRAC process, which is base relocation and closure, that created Fort Ord, created CSUMB. But if they went through the BRAC process, it wouldn't be able to be sold to private developers or anything. It would automatically go to National Park Service because they would be the ones running the park. And what are the Army's plans for Lower Presidio Historic Park? We see in today's, like we've got, wars going on and people at high alert. These can really change buffer zone access. And what are the capital maintenance costs? And recommended public engagement approach, initial engagement, presentations. That's what I'm here. And next slide, I think the next one is just community workshop. And we had one of our community workshops and may have more. And I think that's it. Questions and anything?
All right, thank you. Now we'll open it up.
Chair.
No, thank you for the presentation. And at this point, I know you have it all by heart. So thank you. I'll open it up to commissioners. Commissioner Curvello.
I really do think it's an important site, and I hope we still have some access to it no matter what happens. Just the perspective and telling the story from that point of view with the forts that have been there, I think it's important to the story of Monterey. I also, one slide you showed was not, however, that site. And so did you recognize that? It's a slide before the projects and Presidio Hill. I don't know if you want to roll back to that, but that's actually kind of the back of San Carlos Cathedral. And they had the adobe church in front, and they were building they had the scaffolding up for the stone church in the back. And it just,
Which one?
it's prior to projects and prior to Presidio Hill. If you go back
That
to
one.
where it said projects and Presidio Hill. And then you show a picture of a site, not that one, not that. There you go. There,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
So you see there's sort of a branch on the left side. And if you follow it in the original of this, which is of course much bigger and kind of colorized, there's scaffolding there. And that's to build the stone cathedral. And just to the right of that is a pointy thing. And that's the adobe that was there. And there's the Presidio that used to be, the church was one side of it and it extended to the YMCA. So that's what you're looking at there.
Right.
At
That's
Presidio Hill.
right. That's the original Lower Presidio, which would have been there where El Estero and San Carlos Chapel
Yes.
is, right?
Yeah.
So basically,
We're a location of many Presidios, actually. If you count all of them, you can do a nice presentation on the Presidios of Monterey.
well,
It goes on and on. So I just wondered if, that I just wanted to point out that that's actually where the church is. I didn't understand that you separated. I thought you were still talking about the Presidio.
that is the earliest kind of drawing, one of the earliest drawings of the Presidio. But yeah, when they built the Presidio next to San Carlos Cathedral and the Presidio walls. And the Presidios that they used, they had a standard Spanish architect that had the same design, like through the different areas. They used a pretty standard thing, but that's part of, the walls on like Fremont over
Mhm.
around
Yeah.
there. That's all
I
of it.
did that tour from the church.
Yeah.
And you can see it. It's sort of like a Western fort
Mhm.
size, just like we used to see, TV show Ren 10 or something,
Yeah.
would be kind of that
He's
sort
too
of
young.
thing. And I'm trying to figure out when I first started paying attention to this here, Bill Wachowski, or I just have trouble with his last name, he was doing presentations with the community on the big project of building the pathway and accessibility. So what was the funding for that project? And were we involved as the city of Monterey in that project?
Yeah, so from my understanding, that was prior to my time here, but I believe some of that was NCIP funding, and that was also, there was grant funding and private donors from OMF. So Old Monterey Foundation, they did it in partnership with the city. All of the historic panels were done because they worked on that, like they did like in the pathway and the historic panels. The panels were done by command historian Cameron Binkley Dennis Copeland and Old Monterey. They had another, I forget his name. There was a director of the Old Monterey Foundation, it wasn't Bill Wojo, but it was somebody else, but there was another person involved in that on that site, but multiple parties were involved in that and in the funding of it.
And so it was funded by various sources,
Mhm.
and that's holding up pretty well. That
Well-
work.
The walkway there, yes, the walkway that goes to where the Sarah path is. The other path was what I mentioned was the DG, which is a decomposed granite. And that's the one that's like kind of on that one goes from pretty much the Presidio Museum over towards kind of the Bolio Gate. And that's on the hillside. That one just needs like more maintenance because it's not concrete. It's basically, like it's not as easy to walk on, I would say. But the pathway that goes up to Slope Monument is good. That pathway is good. There was an NCIP project for repair of the base of Slope Monument, which has not been completed. And I think there's additional work that needs to be done on like Slope Monument and some of the other sites. But the actual pathways, the signage, those kind of things are fine right now.
I just hope we continue to have access to that walk that was developed and be able to kind of plot, where the Castillo and the fort was, and just have that view of the bay it's really quite magnificent. And I think it's nice if we continue to have access, no matter who's organizing it. I think it would be nice to have that as part of the package,
Mhm.
because I think it's important. And I do appreciate the people that give docent tours. I think that's really great. And I've had some of those tours and it's really nice. I also know those soft hills that are part of California's, that's just part of California in different places. And sometimes they're not structurally stable, and that one isn't a hard rock hill. In my opinion, it has soft areas. And so it probably will continue to take, we have to be aware of the condition of it and the erosion and all of the things that you were talking about.
Mhm.
And that equals money in order to maintain it. But I think it's great if we can continue to have access. It is an important site. So thanks for all the work you do.
All right. I think we have a Commissioner Paizo.
Yeah, my impression from your presentation is that the Army's future plans for this space is pretty nebulous at this time. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, what I'd heard before, at one point they wanted to have parking up there because of the flat land up there and getting people up into DLI, Defense Language Institute, or we're not entirely sure because they still reserve the right with national security that they could just say, hey, we're going to put up a fence and do this. But when we've talked with them, they are interested in us continuing to maintain the park. I will say that because of, as I mentioned with like the Monterey Way, where we have public works staff that work directly on site. We do these kind of work for them. They don't have the staff that can do that kind of the daily kind of mowing, maintaining it, operating the museum, those kind of things. So they want somebody to do that. So I think it's in their interest right now for us to have it. So that's why I do think like they came out with their plan, which was that the Army, initially they had asked the city to fund the entire wall in the hillside on their property. And so the proposal that they've put forward says we want to continue to work with the city and we're going to fund and design the wall. So they're going to build like whatever kind of wall and also kind of drainage work, the design so that there's less of the sloughing on there, whether that's infill, whether that's water drainage, whatever we need to do. So I think they are working to see like how they can collaborate still.
Have you presented to them any sort of plans of what you envision the park being like in the future?
Well, I think one thing that's always interesting that I think about is their commanders change every 2 years. And then you have regional, and they have different higher levels. So we're not always aware of what's there. I will say a couple of years ago, we did meet with their leadership team and said, hey, what do we want to see? What are possibilities, and what's the best way to address these kind of things? And my communication consistently was, my most important thing is consistent public access. That's the most important thing to me, is just to say, if we're operating the museum, personally, professionally is fine. We're operating the museum with volunteer docents. I'm like, another organization, that's a lot of museums do that in this region. It's their volunteer docents. It doesn't have to be my staff running that side, but the park itself should be open. My goal would be perpetuity for Monterey residents. And everyone, the visitors, community, everybody. So that's really where I want to see it.
And then also, does the Army have any approval or authority over ultimate design plans there?
As far as no, yes, because it would be under, if it did it on their property, it would be under NEPA guidelines too. So they would do it under their federal guidelines rather than through CEQA. So if they're doing anything, I believe they're going to do everything on their side. So we did write a presentation, I believe that was 1 or 2 weeks ago, where it went to council and had Mayor Williamson put forth a letter of support for the project and to do the short wall along the side.
No, sure, I understand the requirements for any work that you do there, but in terms of the use of the space that you may envision, do they have any say over what you can or cannot do there?
They do. So anytime we have to do any tree work, anytime we have to take out a bush, a plant, we have to put in an environmental request with the Army. Whenever we're doing an event, and I know some of the commissioners even here, we had to put in a environmental request of what the impact is on that site. And I worked with that, and I worked with the Presidio, and I actually put in a request for group use of that. So it doesn't go, even though the city manages the park, you cannot request it through the recreation department. You request any use of the park through City of Monterey, the museums and cultural arts, the library. And so I then connect. So like the Boy Scouts wanted to do a bicycle rodeo. So I had to get the permit, get the request, go through the Army, and Army say, can we still do this project? So ultimately they oversee that activity. Yes, still, at least for now.
What do you mean, at least for now?
Well, I mean, if we had a acceptable use policy rather than right now it's basically, if we're going through, if I'm having a request for what types of programs could be used there, it would be a lot easier if we said, these are the spaces that you can hold the program. These are the types of programs you can do. And the city of Monterey is going to do that. Rather than right now, I have to work with the public works engineering, public outreach people, depending on if ecological staff, that stuff, it's like, I feel like it's a little bit extra work for something like
There's a lot of extra work for every single event.
Exactly.
Right. So, yeah. Okay. That's good.
Yes.
And I was one of those people that, and I think I should apologize to you, because we thought we were talking with somebody at the city that knew what they were doing, and the event was getting closer. And then it turned out all of a sudden you really had to jump and get permission on a short notice when we had the Native Daughters of the Golden West have a lunch in the picnic tables and walk up the hill and back. It wasn't a huge event, but I know what you're saying about the process. In terms of building up there, I think that's a really good question. What would be I think you'd have to be really careful about building with these soft hills. That's been done before, and houses have not held up over rainstorms and erosion. I think it's great that we did not subdivide that hill, and I wouldn't want that to happen in the future. That would be another opinion I have about it. I don't think it's appropriate for subdividing.
All right. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question. The displays or whatever that the Army removed
Mhm.
their museum and it went somewhere back east.
Mhm.
Do they exist? Can they be brought back? I mean, I can't think of anything. If you're going to have I'm guessing, are they dioramas or some sort of something like that? Any place besides Monterey, that would be terribly interesting.
Yeah, I was just told by, their cultural historian who resigned, and that's where she told me they went to Virginia, that they were sent to their storage out there. I don't know if that's, and I couldn't find records of them yet, but when I was doing the tour for the other group, I was mentioning, like, I tried to contact the Naval Museum for a Navy boat display that had to do with the Congress, which is the ship that Walter Colton came out on. And we have photos from the 1960s of this boat. But I said, can I have new photos? Can we find out the model? No one's ever got back to me. But I do feel like it's got to be somewhere. Those models have to be somewhere in there. We just don't know what condition they're in or what they did with them. They may have had other things, because we have things like cannonballs in there from the cannonball from 1840 when there was a Mexican they tried to overthrow the Mexican government here. Some of those kind of things. And we have like the Colonel Fitch sword that's used for La Merienda.
Mhm.
That one's kept up inside there as well. So some of those things we still have, but yeah, we're missing a lot of stuff.
It's, we've tried to query the Navy and the Coast Guard historians, and they're not very responsive, to
Yeah.
be honest. So luck with that.
Thank you.
That's a very nice way to put it. Any other questions? If not, go ahead.
Yeah, touching on the potential of national park status. Any feelings, thoughts on the likelihood, the possibility, the desire to have it be completely in federal hands?
Well, I think, the first part is they do, like, Secretary of Interior, they do what the House bill would do is what's called a special resource study. And they would do a new study, and it would probably be similar to one of the studies that they've done in the 60s and 70s, making it a nationally recognized site. So I feel like there's enough there. There's so much different layers and levels of history that, in my opinion, it would classify for national recognition. The most similar one, in my opinion, was Cabrillo National Monument, which is if you're in San Diego, because Cabrillo came out for 1542 and, came out here to Bay of Pines, also named as Bay of Pines. But they have the Cabrillo National Monument, which is next to the Navy land. So this would be, like very similar next to Army land. So this would be something like that, where I think it's a possibility. I think federal, as you've probably seen in the news, like IMLS, Institute Museum and Library Services, National Park Services, consistently see decreases in funding or shutdowns and everything like that. So that would be the one concern. But if it was just like marked as like an open space in a park with very limited things in there, I don't know. I think that would be that study to say, like, what would that management be? What buildings would they occupy? Would they have somebody stationed at a Fort Ord that would just have to be the ranger or whatever you call it for there? Because it's a pretty small site. But I think there's a lot of community support. And because Leon Panetta helped save that park, that's why I thought Jimmy Panetta would also be a great person to help save the park in the future too.
Has Representative Panetta expressed any strong belief that it could happen, or?
Well, I've been working with his staff directly on the report. So I worked on the text. So we'll see where it goes. But I worked on the text directly with the Loni Costa Nation, with our command historian, and with Dennis Copeland before he passed. So I worked with numerous people just on getting the right text for them.
And does anybody have any concept of what the timeline might be for that to go through?
I think if it were to go past, I believe it's like a 3 to 4 year kind of project.
I might live to see it.
All right. I think I saw her hand, and you're next. Go ahead.
Last one. There's a kind of an article in that same weekly about the Dianza and why we're not celebrating it. But it made me think, here come 240 people, and they just walked a long ways and probably tired, and they rested in Monterey. They had a couple hundred stock, and it was a parade, a long group of people. Where did they stay? Did they stay up on the hill in this the Lower Presidio? Did they stay down in the fort? Well, no, they couldn't have stayed down there. Well, how did they, where were they staying when they were in Monterey?
Well, they were camped. They have different camp records, and so they camped over at where the Presidio was before. So if you look at the Presidio, if you look at the De Anza Foundation, it does mark visit the Lower Presidio Historic Park Hill. And I told them that's not the actual site. It would have been over by the San Carlos Cathedral, over by El Estero. There are some granite rocks that are on the corner of El Estero by Fremont and Camino El Estero. That's actually was done for the 200th celebration. Those statues, those rocks there, those granite stones. That's around the campsite would have been right around there.
In around San Carlos, not up. It gets confusing which Presidio and what we're talking.
Yes.
So I was just wondering, and do we have any, are we doing anything for the De Anza at all, or remembering?
We're not doing any presentations. The image on the cover is a photo I took of our painting this, and I put in the library's lobby. Got the Jack Laycock's painting this on the cover of the weekly. The map that I had redone inside the city manager's office right over there, that's inside of there from the image on the inside that was done. That tile map was restored because the tile map had been damaged and fell off. So we don't have any kind of activities and celebrations going on right now.
All right, Commissioner O'Neill.
Just a comment that if an agency like the Army Historical Command gets an inquiry from a congressman, they are obligated to respond. So just a hint.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to respond. Whoever it is, if it's the pay, or when my husband was a company commander in the Marine Corps, if the corporal's mother didn't get a letter and she went to the congressman, they would get a letter and he would have to respond to, yes, little Johnny is doing just fine. So anyway, it's just, it's an avenue. You wouldn't want to bombard them, but
Right.
it works. So
All right.
good luck.
Thank you. Any other questions? I would just comment that I know we're in lean budget times, but let's not do anything rash. We can always cut back, but backing out of a lease, it would be very permanent. I hope City Council hears this. Instead of spending 80,000 a year, maybe we can spend 40 for now and just keep it. And this is coming from a former docent of the Presidio Museum at some point. And thank God for all those volunteers that do it. So
You get the volunteer mowing.
what?
Right, they're
Oh,
there.
Boy Scouts, yeah.
That's right. Yes, that's right. All right, let's open it up to, I'm going to ask Spencer if there's anybody online that may want to speak on this item.
See, there are currently no attendees online, but I would just remind if they do join, information on how to participate remotely by Zoom or telephone is found at monterey.gov/agendas. If you are joining by telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute.
Thank you, Spencer. And I don't see anybody. I'll open it up to in-person public comment, and I see none. All right. So I don't think this is an action item. So thank you very much for the report. We appreciate it. Thanks
you.
for all the work you do. Thank you, Brian. All right. Let's move on to our second item. I see Fernanda. I'm going to stall while she walks over to the computer. And we're going to go to item number 4, which is receive a report on certified local government 2024-25 annual report.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Fernanda Roveri, Principal Planner for the City of Monterey. And I will present to you the CLG Annual Report for reporting year October 2024 to September 2025. So first of all, what is a CLG? It means Certified Local Government. The CLG program is a preservation partnership between local, state, and federal governments focused on promoting historic preservation at the local level. The program is jointly administered by the National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Office in each state, with each local community working through a certification process to become recognized as a CLG. And because the City of Monterey is a CLG, every year we are required to submit a report to the State Office of Historic Preservation to document the HPC's accomplishments and to prove that we maintain our certification requirements. So how to become a CLG? In order to become a CLG, you have to maintain a fully staffed Historic Preservation Commission with at least 2 qualified professionals, which we do. We also have and enforce a local historic preservation ordinance. We also maintain a system to survey, inventory historic resources, which we do in our historic preservation ordinance, and facilitate public participation in local preservation, which we do by holding public hearings. This map here shows that Monterey, Carmel by the Sea, Salinas, and Monterey County are CLGs, and Pinnacles is a national park. If the Lower Presidio Historic Park becomes a National Historic Park, it will show up as a tiny green polygon on this map. So because we are a CLG, we get these benefits. We have access to state grants to fund surveys, National Register nominations, training, etc. We get technical assistance from historic preservation staff. Also, it is well documented that historic districts maintain higher property values, less population decline, more walkability, and greater sense of community. This map shows CLGs and national parks across the country. As you can see, it is a large network. So now I will share some highlights from the report. We have a fully staffed commission with great attendance. By the way, as you can see, it really shows how dedicated you all are. And of our 7-member commission, 5 are qualified professionals in the field of history and city planning, which is a closely related field. During the reporting period, the HPC recommended that 817 Martin Street receive historic zoning and the Mills Act contract, which the City Council approved. The contract was recorded at the County Recorder's Office last year. The HPC reviewed and approved 3 historic permits. The first is the 1078 West Franklin, William O. Stevens House Repairs and Alterations Project. The HPC visited the site, and if you remember, the terrace had extensive water damage. The project included repairs and alterations to the terrace, windows, and other components to rehabilitate the building and make it functional and watertight for the owner. The HPC also reviewed the inclusion of an apartment unit at the 2nd story of the historic La Aida Cafe building, now Ostino's Patisserie, at 851 Cannery Row. Lastly, the HPC reviewed alterations to the Hellam House at 581 Scott Street. The HPC visited the site and evaluated plans for a 2nd-story deck expansion and skylights on the tobacco barn and the garage. Woo! The HPC had a combined total of 80 hours of historic preservation training, which is outstanding. As you know, every historic preservation commissioner must have at least 1 hour of training completed per reporting period, and you all exceeded that tremendously. And lastly, the State Historic Preservation Office is interested in learning what topics you would like to learn more about. And so just from listening to you during these meetings, it sounds like more training would be appreciated on applying the criteria for adoption of historic zoning, demolition by neglect, Mills Act contracts, and sensitive alterations and additions. And with that, staff recommends that the HPC receive the report, hopefully accept it, and make any corrections if necessary.
All righty, I'll open it up to commissioners if they have any comments, corrections, questions.
Just thanks for the nice presentation. It looks pretty good when we see it written up. Bernadette.
I just have one brief, Fernanda, I promise it's not ego. On page 15 of the packet, it says, my name, attorney. I'm also a trained historian. The only reason I mention it is because I know it matters to the composition, but I saw it on my resume. It's there. So I don't know if you want to add there. I have an MA in history, although it's never been my official profession.
Someday.
Someday. That's right.
Yes, I can, so on page 15 of the
packet.
PDF, the attachment 1.
Yes. So you have the commission membership under Roman numeral 2A. But like I said, for posterity, because this is recorded, it's not ego. It's to help the commission if the commission needs another historian on it. That's it.
Yeah.
That would be my only suggestion.
So attorney and historian?
I see. Now it sounds like it's ego, but yes. Yes. If it helps the commission, if not, attorney's fine.
I'll make that change.
Okay. Since you're changing just that a P between my first name and last name, please. And that's and that's it. Spencer, do we have anybody online that so just confirming no commissioner comments or corrections?
No.
All right, Spencer, do we have anybody online that would want to comment?
There are currently no attendees online.
Thank you very much. I see none in person. So I think this is not an action item, correct? We just thank you for, do you want to need us to vote to receive?
Yes.
Okay.
With the changes.
That's right. All right. So do we have a motion to accept or receive the report with the suggested changes? I can make, okay, go ahead.
I'll move that we accept the report with the changes.
Thank you. And we have a second, Commissioner Collin and O'Neill, not in that order, but for motion and second. All right. And all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you very much, Fernanda. Appreciate the report. All right. Moving on to our last item, which is planning update.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So as noted in the agenda packet, there's currently no items that are tentatively scheduled for our April 9th meeting. However, that's some time away, so that might change. So we'll certainly let this group know if something does make its way onto the agenda. Besides that, also noted are the upcoming historical and cultural events, beginning with Neurodiversity and Disabilities Awareness Month Art Show. That's going to be in PG on March 13th at the Art Abilities Studio. There's also Monterey Parks Cutting Day, which is very popular, as you all know, and Horticultural Fair 2026, which is going to be out here at Colton Hall Lawn. And of course, Rhythms and Resistance is a concert at CSUMB on March 21st. And that's all we have.
Thank you. I know we're very active in the historic community. Any events from the commissioners? Yes. Thank you.
Plug for the Monterey State Historic Park Association. I attended the lecture on the Bhutan sisters who did a lot on the peninsula in terms of mosaics, murals, etc. I have their book that Wendy Van Dyke, I can't remember her other name. I've heard it twice. In fact, once at the library and at the California Theater last Saturday. And I did pick up Poetry in the Park that the Historic Park Association is doing also at the California State Theater, First Theater on April 4th from 1 to 3. They have these little things. So they'll probably be at the library and so forth, and Custom House, different places like that. But Mimi Sheridan, historian and a preservation specialist, opened the lecture last Saturday. She's now the president of the group. And so I think it's important to support these different things that they're doing. It was very interesting and sold out. It was packed.
All right. Yes, Commissioner Cravell.
Two things. One is that planning started for the Merienda, which always celebrates the birthday of Monterey. And this month in March, if you're a member of Monterey History and Art, you can purchase tickets. And we're always, this is a good time to get them because it often sells out. And so in April, those who are not members can purchase tickets, cost $25 more, but you get a first chance if you're a member. The second thing is April 13th, Mimi, who is the president of Monterey Parks, is going to make a presentation to the Native Daughters at the Casa Serrano on Margaret Jacks. And Margaret Jacks was the last Jacks to survive due to we don't know if it's because they were, they were not popular in terms of the way they acquired their property. But there's a really positive story about how the properties are being used now and all the really great things Margaret Jacks did in terms of bequeathing her resources to a variety of different things. So if you're interested in knowing more about Margaret Jacks, I would welcome you to come. It'll be at 7:00 at the Casa Serrano on April 13th.
Right. Perfect. Thank you.
I have one.
Yes, please.
I won't be here in April, so I'm traveling, so.
He left, but I did go to the event on Sunday, and I just want to thank and plug Brian. If he ever does a walk or something, he's fantastic. So he's really interesting. Have you all had the chance?
It's amazing what he can take in and bring out in such a wonderful way. We were lucky to get in.
Very engaging, and it was a really fun. It was a really, really cold day after a few warm days, but you couldn't even feel it because he had us walking all over the place. So it was a very nice day. So if you see him before I see him next month,
I'll just also add, he didn't mention it. He mentioned the Monterey County Weekly, but there's also a nice picture of Brian in the Weekly this week. There's also a nice picture of Brian in the Weekly. He didn't mention that. He's being modest.
Hat and all?
Hat and all.
Oh.
Right out here in front of Colton Hall.
All right.
Extension of the historic path. What's happened with that where Brian took us through the Presidio, Cannery Row, everywhere? Do you know anything about that?
You should have had him while he was in here. He's your guy.
That's monetary concerns. Nothing happening right now.
Probably.
I guess I
Maybe we
answered
can invite him
my
back to
question.
tell us about that.
Yeah.
All righty. If nothing more for the group, we will adjourn the meeting. Historic Preservation Commission at 5:01 p.m.